It's a slightly sad story. I waited 13 years for my husband to propose to me, and on Christmas Eve I found a lump in my breast, and on Christmas Day I got engaged, and then 3 weeks later I was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. So our life went from guess this and planning in this complete euphoria to absolutely crushing, am I even going to make it through the next 6 months? So it was an incredible learning curve, but as a journey that I went on, I have learned so much about myself and so much about work and about people and about kindness and about cutting people's slack and actually being a better human being.
Hello and welcome to the Women of the Future podcast, a podcast made in collaboration with the Women of the Future programme, a platform built to unlock a culture of kindness and collaboration among leaders, as well as support and celebrate the successes of women. I'm Kim Rowell and I won the media category at their awards in 2018 in recognition of my continued work as a commissioner, producer and children's author, particularly within the mental health remit. I'll be talking to my guests on this podcast about their careers, who or what gave them their first big break, their successes, failures and inspirations along the way, and how they came to be a part of the Women of the Future network. Deputy Managing Director at leading publishing agency Think, Jackie Scully is a business professional with a purpose. Winner of the Women of the Future Community Spirits Award in 2015, as well as the PPA Unsung Hero Award in June of this year, Jackie makes every day count, balancing a hugely successful career with charity work and encouraging others into exercise following her own diagnosis of breast cancer in her early 30s. I met with Jackie at her offices in North London.
I grew up in the West Country near Bath, and I think I had a really brilliant upbringing. I lived in what you might now call a kind of market town that is where they film lots of Pride and Prejudice, so sort of felt like I went back in time. And I had a brilliant supportive network in my family who helped me basically focus on sport and all the things I love doing with my extracurricular activities as well as my work, and they gave me the best foundation I could have possibly asked for.
Were you quite an active child?
Yes, very active as a child. I always was in every team, up early for swimming before work, and I really, really enjoyed it. But I was always very into my work as well, so it was all about the essays and the extracurricular drama club, and I did pretty much a little bit of everything, which has been a trait of my adulthood as well.
So when did you move to London? Was that your first big move?
Yes.
Did you go to university? Or?
I've literally bounced across the country.
Okay.
So started in the West Country, then did my university degree at Oxford, and then moved straight to London 3 days after I finished my degree.
Wow.
Which was terrifying. When everyone else was having a summer, I decided it'd be really good to go straight into work. And
you went straight to work? You didn't just move, you went to a job?
3 days. So I did some work experience in my second year holiday, and they called me up randomly the day I finished my finals at what was 4:30 in the afternoon, and I was quite drunk, to offer me a job with the proviso that I moved to London as soon as possible. So I literally left university, went home, packed my bags, moved my life into what was then student accommodation that had been vacated for the summer because there was no place to get accommodation so quickly, and spent the summer in London where everyone else was partying, just sort of earning my trade, and I've literally never stopped.
Did you have to think about it, or when they offered it to you, you were like, in a heartbeat,
I just decided to take it. I think for me, it's, as I sort of described, I've done so many things across my life that I've always had so many plates spinning that when this came up, I thought, well, why wouldn't I just take the opportunity and go? And I hadn't really had that pull of where am I really going in my life. So I just thought I'd take the door that opened and have never looked back.
As far as your career path is concerned, that first job obviously set you off on the trajectory to where you are now?
Yes.
Or have you had a few curveballs, a few weird and wonderful things along the way?
Well, I've had quite a few curveballs. I started work, as I say, very, very soon as a graduate, but I was working for a company of 5. So for my first 3 years of my career, I basically had a quick learning on everything.
Where was this?
This was a company called Wrap that then rebranded itself as Aspect. So it was higher up the directory listings.
Okay.
And essentially, I did everything from new business pitching to editing magazines to managing freelancers from the age of 21. And it was an astonishing learning curve. But it was also marginally terrifying, and not knowing anyone in London, only working with 4 other colleagues, meant it was quite isolating as a role. And then I moved to what is now the company that I work for my first round here. So I've come back since.
Oh, right, okay.
And so I worked there as an editor and a deputy editor for 2.5 years.
Okay.
And in that time I edited a book with Bill Bryson and did the most incredible things and edited a number of magazines for the travel industry and charities primarily.
Okay.
Loved writing and editing, did a good chunk of that, and then I sadly found that my leg was not going to be able to support my body anymore. So I was 24, walking along the bridge by London, Waterloo, and my leg gave way.
Right.
And I went to see a physio thinking I just needed a little bit of rehab, and he said that within 6 months I wouldn't be able to walk again if I didn't have my pelvis sawn in 3 and rehabilitated and stepped back together again.
Okay, oh, hang on. Let's just pause for a moment. So you say gave way. It literally, you just kind of fell,
I was just
fell,
walking
or?
along.
Okay.
Nope, just walking along
Right.
on the way back from the theatre, and my leg just gave way in front of me, and
Right.
I'd never happened before.
So you literally fell on the floor, or
Just sort of fell over. Yeah.
You were in pain, or
And from that on, I couldn't run for the bus.
Right.
Couldn't dance to people's weddings. So it took 1.5 years to work out what the problem was, because it was so rare.
Did you realise at the time it was something? I mean, had you been building up to this moment, or had you had any warning signs or anything? This literally happened.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and then it led to, as I say, by the end of it, it was about 4 or 5 years of my life basically learning how to walk again in your mid-20s when everyone
Right.
else is having fun and discovering themselves.
So this happened, and you then lived with it, did you say, for a year? Or?
Well, there were only a couple of people in the country at that point who actually did the surgery that was required to fix the problem.
So they knew what the problem was?
Eventually, but it took about 3 different surgeons to diagnose the problem.
What was it?
It's hip dysplasia. Basically, I had a bit missing from my hip as a young child. So basically, my hip socket was too shallow to support my hip bone, so it kept falling out of the socket.
And this is the first you knew about it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So my 20s, if I was to characterise them, would be spent walking, learning to walk again. But that led me to the opportunity to work with Bill Bryson. So I ended up doing this book, this anthology called Icons of England, with 70 celebrities talking about their special parts of the countryside. It would never have happened had I not been in a wheelchair.
Really?
Because it was a project that I would never have undertaken, because it was such a huge task. With all my current projects and regular work,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to absorb it.
So why did you?
Because I was sat at home unable to lift a thing, but my brain was functioning.
Okay.
So they thought, what can we give her? Which means she doesn't have to talk to any clients. She can just get on with it and see what she can make of it. And it was a labour of love.
Okay.
But it led to me winning a load of awards. It was a huge success of a book. And to be able to do that in my mid-20s because of the unfortunate situation that happened to me is something that will sort of stay with me for the rest of my life.
That's quite incredible. So what was your role was to edit the book?
Yeah, and so I got to write the foreword, which was very exciting. And then I got to liaise with all 70 celebrities, got to edit all of their copies. So there were some novelists.
Who are we talking about?
Everyone from Eric Clapton to Kevin Spacey, Benjamin.
So you're like, hey, Eric.
literally, Benjamin
I
Zephaniah.
like your writing.
Yeah. And there was even a chap called Miles Kington, who was a massive journalist in jazz, which was quite a discreet community, but he was really well known. And actually, he was dying of cancer at the time. We didn't know. He filed his copy and died. And I had in my inbox the last piece of copy he ever wrote.
Oh my god!
So I felt it was this most incredible book. I can't
kind
explain.
Of gives you a bit
Oh, it
shivers,
really does.
doesn't
And I
it?
had to call his wife and say, I need to edit this, but he can't approve this.
What did she say?
She was absolutely, she said, he wrote this because he believes in what you're doing, please publish it. And she came to the launch party, and it was just
so
incredible.
Obviously Bill Bryson's a travel writer, so were they writing about their travel experiences?
They were writing about things in England that for them are sort of iconic. So Eric Clapton wrote, for example, was talking about playing cowboys and Indians in his local woods. And then Brian Ferry wrote about the monument under which he was conceived. We got into such personal detail so quickly. I thought everyone was going to talk about the White Cliffs of Dover and Stonehenge.
Yes.
But they went quite discreetly. Even Raymond Blanc started talking about apples. It was really lovely, and it was the most amazing project I did, and I believe that it was the problems I had in my life that led me on that path.
Okay.
Sadly, the operation left me with a hole in my leg. So I had to give up my full-time job here in order to go off and sort of rehabilitate myself.
So what did they do? You mentioned it briefly, that they kind of rebuilt your pelvis.
Yeah, so they sawed it in three, and then
your whole pelvis.
Yeah,
the whole
and
thing.
then they sort of pinned it back together again. So
your pelvis is big.
Yeah,
it's not like
it was so
your little pinky finger.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was a huge operation and a huge rehabilitation, and I basically went back to work too quickly, and I learned my lesson quite quickly that bodies need to heal, and to heal they need rest. So that's what I did, and I went off and did some freelance work. I worked with some cable company. I worked with doing comms and writing and websites.
So you went freelance?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And then I ended up writing a blog for a former Miss Ireland for a while.
Okay.
And so for somebody...
quite random.
It was really random. So for somebody who wasn't really interested in fashion, I ended up doing all these amazing sort of interesting blogs and pieces of writing, whilst also writing about the detail of how electric current gets through electrical cables, and I had the most random 18 months.
Did you enjoy it?
I did, but I absolutely realised I missed the agency world. I missed that serving clients, doing magazines, creating content that makes people do things.
It's good that you tested the water though, right? Like, it sounds like you did like a smorgasbord of different things just to maybe challenge yourself, but also to see, am I interested in that?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you came back to the realisation that your future
loved the agency,
publishing.
but realised that maybe editing and writing was something I loved doing so much. I didn't want to do it as a profession. I wanted to do it in my spare time. And so when I came back, when I put myself out there as being on the market for a full-time agency job, Think called me up the day I was offered 2 other jobs and said, we've heard you were available, can you come back, we want you. And it was amazing, and I came back, I did a little bit of editing and then moved into account direction, and then have since gone from account direction to new business, to research, to running the company, and I'm now deputy MD. So I've gone on a massive growth curve.
You're still very young as well, aren't you?
Yeah, so mid-30s still. So
in the space of 10 years?
Yeah.
You've done all of this?
Yes. And grown a company from 23 people to 70. But also, the one thing I haven't said is, so after my leg, so my 20s was all about my rehabilitation of my leg. And then when I was in my early 30s, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So again, was faced with a brick wall of health issues that I.
You say that as though I just went and got a coffee. And, again, hold on, let's just stop.
Yeah. So it's a slightly sad story. I waited 13 years for my husband to propose to me, and on Christmas Eve I found a lump in my breast, and on Christmas Day I got engaged, and then 3 weeks later I was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. So our life went from guess this and planning in this complete euphoria to absolutely crushing, am I even going to make it through the next 6 months? So it was an incredible learning curve, but as a journey that I went on, I have learned so much about myself and so much about work and about people and about kindness and about cutting people's slack and actually being a better human being.
I think one of my questions seems quite small and stupid now. Did it change your outlook on life?
It totally did. There were a few things. One, I had an obsession with time, not wasting time. I couldn't sit in a meeting that was going on. I had to sort of speed it up and say, guys, we've got so much to do with our lives, get on with it, which did fade over time. But I think I just realised that I redefined my definition of success, essentially.
What would you say are the kind of big fundamental things that changed for you and stuck, I guess? I mean, you mentioned time as one thing.
Yeah, but self-care is huge. Women, as a general rule, just don't look after themselves enough. I was the same. I worked, I think, people say, what was your biggest failure in life? I think it was working too hard and making other people work too hard too. I was so hard on myself, but I was also really hard on everyone around me.
But do you think that was from ambition and,
It was.
wanting to progress? And you sounded like, from what you were describing earlier, you sounded like you were really keen and eager and excited and enthusiastic, which are all very positive things.
It is, but when you're sat in a hospital bed and the nurse looking at you says, where's you're running around looking for your BlackBerry, literally after life-saving surgery, and she looks at you and she says, Jackie, what are you doing with your life? Is that what your life is all about? Because if it is, you'll just realise in the next 9 months of treatment that is the thing that won't give you any satisfaction. It won't make you feel yourself. And so we all go through our lives saying who we are through the jobs that we have. And I've learnt that I am so much more than the job I have. I have a rounded life. And I think a biggest shift for me not only was adopting more of a kind approach to myself, but also my team, and understanding that to get the best out of people, you really need to recognise that they have obligations outside of life and dreams and ambitions that they can't stick in the office hours. So I learned a lot about that, but I also learned a lot about looking after myself in terms of exercise. I started running during chemo.
Actually, on this point,
yes,
you did your first ever 10k race just days after your last chemo session. Is that right?
Yes, it is. I chose running because obviously from my 20s, my leg obviously was the big issue, and everyone said I'd never run, maybe run for the bus, but nothing more. So when cancer came along, I thought, what should I do that's really hard, that can prove to my body once and for all that I am not done? So I chose running.
But you weren't a runner?
Oh no, well my leg
so you've never really
Nope, awful.
So where do you start when you've been told that you probably couldn't walk in your early 20s and you've now got a rebuilt pelvis and you're like, okay, let's go running?
Well, I was in the shower in my parents' house and my hair was coming out in I literally blocked up their shower and they had to get the plumber out, and it was all really bad. But anyway, whilst I was focusing on the fact that I had hair coming off in clumps, I thought, I'm just going to feel bad about myself for so long. So I thought, I've got to do something about this. So my dad, who is a runner, said, let's go outside. And so I got my really tatty trainers on and we just went for a walk that then turned into a run. And then I thought, I feel really good. And I just kept it up, and I got further and further and further. And there was this path near my house where it was 209 steps, and every day I'd go out and I'd try and do a bit more. And bearing in mind, when I'd had the surgery on to remove my right breast from the cancer, they took my tummy fat out to shove up here, which is a great use of tummy fat, I have to say. But
you're going to put it anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. But the consequence of that was they had to sew up my stomach, and therefore I was bent double. Right. So I had to learn again how to walk properly upright. Yeah. So I was coping with that whilst also learning to run. So that helped me mobilise myself really quickly. Then I did this 10k and I thought, I'll do another one to celebrate the end of treatment. So I did. My friends were like,
I was just saying, all your friends and family like, what the hell?
I know, literally putting them through serious illness treatment, having all put them through that whole leg thing, literally, and then bringing them along with me. So at the end, it was like, let's all go for 10k. They were like, no, let's go to the pub.
Yes.
And I was like, no, let's do something together. And then it turned into a half marathon, at which point I lost most people.
Yes.
Except for a few hardcore people. And then I thought, I'm going to have a crack at a marathon. And I did. And I set myself a target of 5 hours, and I came in at 5 hours, 1 minute and 3 seconds.
That's very, very impressive.
Which was brilliant, but the 1 minute and 3 seconds really did bother me. So the day after, lying in Pilates thinking, what on earth am I going to do next? Can't really do bigger. I went home and saw my husband and I said, or my boyfriend at the time, I said, I've worked out how we're going to get married. We're going to get married and run the London Marathon and trek the Great Wall of China for our honeymoon. And we're going to raise as much money as we can to gift our wedding back to the people who got us through the treatment year. And amazingly, he said yes. So in 2017, we got up at 5 a.m. We got married on the Cutty Sark in Greenwich. We walked up the hill. We ran the London Marathon. And then we trekked the Great Wall of China and raised £30,000 for charity. So, yeah.
You are the most incredible, like, it literally brings tears to my eyes. My gosh, Jackie.
Yeah, so it was the most incredible. I mean, it went from being an idea that I thought was quite fun, to the most incredible, crazy fundraising, wedding planning, fitness training, a media, everything about it was huge.
Do you think it was good for you to have that focus, I guess? Something to plan, something to prepare for, something to think about, other than maybe how you were feeling physically?
Totally. And I think what's really important is I wanted that proposal after 13 years more than anything in the world.
Why did he wait 13 years?
Oh, he just had commitment,
If he's going to listen to this, 13 years is a long time.
Yeah, he knows. He knows. But when I waited, I thought that was what I wanted in my life. I, like everybody in the world, was chasing landmark events that in my life would define who I was.
Right.
And then it's not lost on me that happened at a point when life got in the way and said, it's not about what you do one day in your life. Yeah. It's about what you do every day. And I realised then that the person I loved, I was always going to love, regardless of whether I was going to get married. So when actually treatment was over, I was like, I don't think we need to get married. And he was like, hang on a second. After 13 years, I plucked up the courage. We are totally going down the aisle. And I said, well, yeah, but I love fundraising and I love volunteering and I love giving back. So if it's not got that in it, I don't have time to plan a wedding.
It needs to be meaningful.
It needs to be meaningful, and it needs to be meaningful to all the people around us who
just
saw us
you.
go through all of this. So we did it, and it got so random that David Seaman's wife was making me a free wedding dress that I could run in, and it all got so... It was such an incredible thing that was exhausting and exhilarating and everything, but it set me on a path, and yeah.
You must have got to China and just collapsed, right?
After China, yeah. And I was injured, so I ended up one night going off to the England sports physio who had happened to know David Seaman, and they got me in late at night and we had a chat. And
thanks, David.
Yeah, it was all very hush-hush because
Yeah.
I had to try and get me through the 6-week period that I needed to be well, and they helped me over that injury problem.
So
and then,
you're still receiving treatment for cancer, or how?
Only hormonal therapy for 10
Right.
years,
Okay.
but I'm considered treated. Just this is a preventative for it to hopefully not come back. But yeah, I still see my hip surgeon, I still see my cancer surgeon. Every time I go, they're like, what is she doing next? And it's my 5 years clear this year. So to celebrate, I'm doing the Big 5, which includes, I've already walked 66 miles around the Isle of Wight.
Wow.
Did a half Ironman.
That's just the thing, because I was supposed to speak to you before, and you were like, oh, well, it's the day before I'm doing a half Ironman, so I might be tired. I was like, well, shall we just do it later?
Yes, and that was quite full on. 8 hours of cardio exercise is quite tough. And then I've just come back from Ben Nevis climbing that. I've got a 34-mile ultramarathon in August along the cliffs near Brighton.
Why do they call it ultra? Because it's really, really tough.
Anything above a marathon is called an ultramarathon. So I went for the shortest one I could find, in fairness, which is still 34 miles.
I'm going to say 34
up
miles
cliffs.
is not to be sniffed at.
Yeah, and then I'm doing a coast-to-coast cycle in September. And I'm also possibly considering a mass spin-a-thon to sort of finish it off if I can find a studio.
Chuck it in there.
So yeah, I'm now more rounded. So when people say to me, what's success? I find it really hard to answer, because 10 years ago I would have said success was producing this book that got me huge profile, got to work with this amazing person, ended up being a pointless answer on the quiz show. It for me, I thought, wow, how am I going to beat that? But if you ask me now what I consider success to be, I would say it's the fact that the day after the marathon, a lady wrote to me and said that her mother had been in a wheelchair for a year, and they had paid for the best physios in the country to come and try and get her up out of this wheelchair. And nobody had any success. She saw us on the television, she heard the story, she read about it, she walked for the first time in a year.
Wow.
And the woman wrote to me, I'll never forget her words, she said, you gave her a confidence she couldn't find for herself, and you have transformed our family by running a marathon. And that, for me, what more do you want to do in life than inspire other people to believe that anything is possible?
Oh gosh.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh wow.
And that's success. That's real success.
Yeah, it really is.
Because getting the money, getting the house, getting the whatever it is, whatever landmark events you think you want, when it all hits the fan and you're lying in bed and you don't know how many days you've got left, what you think about is what you're leaving behind.
You're quiet. No one ever wishes that they spent more hours in the office at their desk sending emails. Doesn't even compare, does it?
No.
Wow. Well, you touched on, I was going to ask you what your greatest success was. I think you've just, now that we're both crying. Okay, and you kind of touched on failure as well. Your failure was that you worked too hard, right?
Yeah. But also, I think I was too hard on other people. I didn't give people the benefit of the doubt. I always was so driven that I expected everyone around me to be as driven. When they had kids, they had commitments, they had volunteering opportunities that they wanted to do. They wanted to be a rounded individual, where I was convinced that working 17-hour days was the answer for everybody.
Were you upset that you didn't help facilitate that, or what? I mean, how did the failure on your part come into that? I guess that you could have been a better manager. Or?
I guess that's the point. Being more, I think, part of being a great manager and a great leader is recognizing the pool of people you've got in front of you and how you're going to get the best out of them. And I have learnt so much that the more flexibility, the more you recognise that person is an individual with hopes and dreams that aren't always linked to work, the more you get out of them. Recognising that someone doesn't need to be in an office, they better be in at home working because they're going to deliver loads more. It's that kind of recognition rather than being, well, I just want everybody here around me so that we can all work really hard and fast. And I've learned, I'm still hard on myself, but I'm less hard on myself. And I also have realised that I will always be a busy person, but now I divide my time between giving back, doing things with a purpose, as well as my work, and that works really well.
Good. Which brings us nicely on to how you came to be involved with the Women of the Future Network.
So I absolutely love the Women of the Future Network and all they stand for, particularly the whole kindness and collaboration thing. So back in 2015, one of my colleagues said, there is this network and I'm just going to put you up for an award because you belong in this world.
Who put you up for it?
A guy called Matthew Rock, who knows the wonderful Pinky Lalani.
Of course, the fantastic.
And he just said, I know that you will, whatever happens with this process, you will get what you need out of it. He says it's not about an award, it's about the people behind the award.
Yeah.
And at that time I didn't really know anybody, so I thought, wow, that's lovely. Thank you for nominating me. I then went on to win the Community Spirits Award, which was recognition of all the philanthropic work, volunteering and stuff I'd done, which was just so amazing. I was so stunned and completely didn't expect it. Was really tired. It was after work, sort of sat there with my husband being like, oh.
How did you find out?
You get shortlisted. They wrote this most lovely email to me and I was so overwhelmed. The interview process was amazing. We all had a good cry in the interview.
Oh, really?
Everybody, all the judges, we all just all cried.
I cried in my interview too, to be fair.
It is such an emotional experience.
It really is. Because you're putting yourself out there, aren't you? You're literally like, here's me, raw, warts and all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was a phenomenal experience. And even meeting all the people I was shortlisted against, incredible people. So I just had the most amazing night. And then I got to know Pinky, I got to know the network. Every time I turn up I get this kind of part imposter syndrome because I'm surrounded by insanely amazing people, but then I also come away thinking, come on Jackie, what can you do to contribute to this? So it's sort of inspiring. A kick and an inspiring moment simultaneously. And then I was lucky enough to be listed on the first 50 Kindest Leaders list last year, which again was just, for me, was a recognition of how far I've come in terms of the kindness I want to bring into the workplace. So I was just so overwhelmed by that.
How did, because nominations for the Kindness and Leadership have just reopened. So how did you get nominated again, or how did that process work for you?
My colleagues sort of ganged up on me.
How dare they?
And they then spoke to some people that I work with in the charity sector, and they did a combined, as I understand it, a sort of combined video nomination about all the things I'd helped them achieve, which was
how
just
lovely.
so lovely.
That's really lovely.
And I just was so overwhelmed that I'd made it onto the list that I then started scrutinising even more. Well, am I kind? Like, what is kindness? And so this year I've become sort of student of kindness, and I've been reading up on the subject.
What does this mean?
Well, I'm running part of it is running a daily Instagram feed called the Daily Kindness Project, where I post about just celebrating kindness, championing kindness, and getting people to think about how small gestures can change the course of someone's day, and in so doing their life.
So what does kindness and collaboration mean to you personally now? Has it evolved from where you started with Women of the Future, but also with your, when you were in your early 20s to where you are now? It must have come a full circle, right?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. So before I was sick, in the year that I was sick, I worked too hard, but I also decided in the September that I was going to make 200 handmade gifts for Christmas for friends, relations, colleagues. Bear with me, this is a random story.
Sorry, 200?
200. So I made everything from bath bombs to handmade clay, gift tags. I mean, I went to town. But in that 3-month period, apart from work, I didn't see anybody. I didn't turn up to people's parties. I didn't spend time with people. I was so focused on delivering all these presents that nobody had asked for. They had and I thought I was being incredibly kind.
So you'd lost sight of the bigger picture, maybe?
Totally.
Yeah.
And when I was sick, the first thing I realised was that I just had to go around the country and spend time with all the people I love. And I realised, I've spoken about this moment with so many of my friends who were like, Jackie, as much as it was lovely to receive a hamper of really random items that you'd obviously spent a really long time doing, I would have loved it if you'd just come to my drinks party in the November. Or I'd loved it if instead of always remembering my birthday, we went out twice a year. And it was a real recognition to me that sometimes kindness isn't what you think being kind really is, and it's about listening to other people around you and responding to their needs. In this kindness project that I've been doing, there was a homeless chap that I met. He sits outside M&S, and I got talking to him, and I said, oh, look, I've bought you some goodies from M&S. And he looked at me and he said, you know what, Jackie, it's about 1 degree outside, and everyone in M&S, everyone comes out and they're really kind and they're really lovely, but they give me cold food. And I looked at him and I thought, I didn't even come over. I didn't even have the decency to come over and say, I'd like to buy you something.
What would you like?
What would you like? And that for me, again, is this recognition that part of being kind is listening and responding, not necessarily doing what you think is right.
God, you hit the nail on the head perfectly. I'd never really even thought about it like that.
Oh, I know. And just the small details. Yeah. Like, I run to work occasionally, a couple of times a month, and I run past a big issue seller who, every time I see him, he goes, well done, keep going. He's never met me. He just is the most brilliant cheerleader. And as I was doing my kindness project earlier this year, I realised I've never stopped to ask him his name. So one day I just stopped and I said, really sorry, I know you've seen me for like 2 years now, but it's a bit weird, but what is your name? And I know his name's Steve.
Oh,
so Steve's my brilliant cheerleader. Every time I see him now, I say, hi, Steve. And it's just things like that. Connections and taking the time to care about other people and turn up in other people's lives. Yeah. I think I always say that I was so busy rushing through life in my 20s and my 30s that I'd forgotten what it was to live. And I thought being present was, sending presents, not actually turning up.
Giving your time.
Yeah.
They say that, in particular regard to gifting, you should give someone an experience that they can either do with whoever they want to, or you can share with them. You know, like whether that's like an afternoon tea or just going to the seaside, promising to buy them an ice cream, whatever. Yeah. But it's, like you just said, it's actually giving them yourself and your focus and your attention. And
that's why for our wedding party, we asked people to do 2 things. So rather than write in a guest book saying how lovely the night was or whatever, I said, I want 2 things from you. 1, could you write over here in a frame a place that you love more than anything in the world that you think we should visit in our lives? A pub, a cafe, a mountaintop. Write it down. And then in our book, write somewhere that you would really like to go, or somewhere that or something that you would really like in your life. And then we promise that we will help you achieve that. And it's again recognition that what matters in life is pulling everybody together and doing the right things together.
Bloody hell, you're amazing. It's even that, you know, it's your wedding day, for Christ's sake. Eat the cake.
again, I wanted to do something, so I wrote an individual postcard to every single person that turned up to our thank you party, and I told them what it was that they had done to help Duncan and I at any point in our lives, and the memories we had of time together. And I've had so many emails and letters from people saying that postcard is like hanging over, you know, it's hanging in my
pride of place.
Yeah, and I think telling people what you mean before it's too late.
They know it's genuine and heartfelt and sincere.
Yeah, and I think you never know what's coming. I woke up this morning to find that one of the women I volunteer with a lot, who actually got a drug listed for people with terminal cancer, she died overnight.
Wow.
And I found out on Facebook, as is the way nowadays. And I get because of my network now, I get constantly reminded that we've got to do what's right, and we've got to spend time doing the right things for us and for those around us, because we don't get a second chance.
But things like that, as sad and awful as it is, makes you check yourself, doesn't it? Like you might have started slipping back into bad habits.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about you specifically.
No.
At that moment,
you
come back to reality, don't you? You come back to what's important.
Yeah, and I talk a lot to people about, you know, everyone says, oh, you go through serious illness, you have to seize every day. And the truth is, that's absolutely exhausting. And it lasts for about 2 minutes. And then you realise you've got to pay a mortgage. You've got to carry on and do your life. So I think it's about recognising that we all have to do a job and have a life and have a career and hopefully love it, but also recognising that we have to do stuff that we thought we would never do. We have to find our edges. We have to, you know, travel to places to watch the sunset, or, you know, we have to do the things that are on our list because they might just stay on our list. And we don't want to be sat lying in a hospital bed looking at the list thinking,
should have done that.
Should have done a bit more.
Yeah. Well, you're so good at this podcast malarkey. I've literally got 2 questions left.
Oh,
okay, they are. Is there anything that scares you? And what is left on your to-do list?
If I was to say what scares me, I think it's the fear that I won't be able to keep moving forward. I live slightly on a knife edge. Obviously doing endurance challenges and going further and further is wonderful.
Knowing that things can go wrong.
Knowing that they can go wrong, and knowing that I have been tested so many times, I don't know how many more times I can be tested. So I fear that. But I also, conversely, sort of fear not reaching my edges, sitting within my comfort zone.
It doesn't stop you, does it?
No. And so it's sort of, if we don't find our edges, we never know. We are always capable of more than we could even imagine. And I think I've learnt that about myself. At like 7 hours in, when you're running and you're just like, what am I doing? And my legs don't work and everything doesn't work and bits are falling off. You know, you think, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have even imagined I could. And I did.
I know, because I've ran a marathon very badly once, but you learn so much about yourself. Don't you? Like, because the thought process you go through when you're running a marathon to keep yourself going, and I can imagine for you, having been through all the awful things you've been through, that must be something in itself, to be in your own head for that period of time. How do you manage that?
I think I just love sort of reflecting on it all, actually, weirdly. When I run, I often listen to podcasts. I often listen to sort of inspirational stories, and I reflect on all the things I want to achieve in my life. And I often come out of the shower thinking, I'm rejuvenated, off I go. So I guess I don't fear time with myself. I guess I just fear that one day my life will be cut dramatically short. And I have to live with that. Breast cancer, sadly, is the only cancer that everyone says it's the best cancer to have, which I don't believe any cancer is good.
Is there a good one?
No, there really isn't. But it's, you know, there's lots of investment in research, which means the treatments are better. But it's the only cancer that after a few years you're not in remission. You never are. So whether it's 10 years, whether it's 15 years, whether it's 25 years later, it can come back. And I've seen what's happened when it does, and I've seen how quickly it changes and cuts things off short.
So that could happen for you?
Yeah. So it's changed everything, you know, it's changed our view on family, having one. It's changed our view on sort of,
Do you want a family?
We talked about it, but you have to be on this drug for 10 years and you have to negotiate to come off if you want to have a child. And as my husband said, I would rather you see out the 10 years rather than come off it and risk me being a single father. So, but I'm sort of reconciled with that. I feel like I always think, like with everything, like with the book and the leg and the cancer and, everything I've done in my life, I always think it was meant to be for a reason. I try and learn something from it. And I just think I'm here for something else, and I'm going to find that.
was there ever a moment, because he's like you just listing them off there, was there ever a moment you just thought, why me? Like, really down and sad and depressed? Did you ever reach... I sort of never got depressed. I think after my leg, not being able to move and walk and not being able to see people, being stuck at home back where I grew up, I thought... I found rehabilitation really hard. But what I didn't know was that it was preparation for the ultimate, kind of cancer diagnosis, which actually I flew into because I was like, right, I know what's going on. Done this. Yeah.
I worried about the experts and the cancer, the rehabilitation with my leg. I'm not worried about that because I know they've got that. So all I'm going to do is go out, have fun, bake cakes, write a blog about the funny side of cancer. I had an amazing year refinding myself.
You knew what to focus on.
Yeah. And I say I am who I am because of all the things life didn't get right rather than all the things that life did. And I'm happy to live by that.
So what's next?
Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. After this, another endurance challenge of a longer, harder, stressful, but also just continuing to volunteer and give back. I'm doing quite a bit of mentoring with young women in media at the moment, and I'm absolutely loving that. Continue to work with Women of the Future as an ambassador, and just really be a reminder to people that, you can get through anything in your life. And, your point about feeling hard done by, one of my friends, funny enough, said to me when I was going through treatment, she was like, don't take this wrong, Jackie, but I'm so glad it happened to you and no one else. Because she said, we, through your energy, are learning that life is really short. And she said, if it had been any of my other friends, they would have all gone into like a little cocoon and we would have all just felt really bad. She said, for you, your serious illness means that we may all avoid a serious illness in the short term because we're reevaluating our lives. She quit her job, she extended her house, she had a third child. She went off and did stuff she had on her list because she didn't know how long they would stay on there. And that for me again is just if I'm going to be the fall guy in life, if that's my job in life, so that other people might thrive, I'm pretty happy with that.
Well, you're the first person that's made me cry.
I don't think that's a good thing.
I do. You are such an awesome, awesome woman, and it's been a pleasure to meet you properly.
It's a pleasure to chat to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Women of the Future podcast. If you enjoyed it, please hit the subscribe button, and while you're there, why not give us a rating and review? You know you want to. For more about the Women of the Future Awards, network and initiative, please visit www.womenofthefuture.co.uk. See you soon.